5-year-old twins living in desperate poverty stumble upon a secret that will shatter everything. A wealthy man, bound and broken, hidden where no one would ever look. For 13 days, they become his lifeline. But when he vanishes without a trace, the mystery he leaves behind will haunt them forever. Welcome to Stories by Jason. If you're settled in and ready for a good story, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I've got another exciting story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for the love and support. You're truly appreciated, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. Also, let me tell you something funny. Someone actually bet that I can't reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of this year, and honestly, I want to prove them wrong. So if you're watching this right now and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and join the family. Reaching 1,000 subscribers is a very personal goal for me, and your support would mean the world to me. Thank you for believing in me and being part of this journey. And before you go, drop your name and location in the comments. I'd love to give you a special shout-out in my next video introduction. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, and neither had the hunger. Juniper pressed her small hand against the window, watching water streak down the cracked glass like tears. Beside her, her twin sister Maisie sat clutching her stomach, too tired even to complain anymore. At 5 years old, they'd learned that complaining didn't fill empty bellies or stop the gnawing ache that kept them awake at night. Their mother was in the bedroom, and they could hear her crying again, the kind of crying that made their chests feel tight and strange. The eviction notice was pinned to the door, bright red letters screaming words the twins couldn't read but understood in their bones. They were running out of time. "Junie," Maisie whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm so hungry it hurts." Juniper turned to her sister, seeing her own hollow cheeks and tired eyes reflected back at her. They'd had nothing but watered-down soup for 2 days, and before that, stale bread someone had thrown away behind the bakery. Their mother had given them her portions, pretending she wasn't hungry, but Juniper had seen how thin Mama's wrists had become, how her clothes hung like curtains on a skeleton frame. "I know where we can find food," Juniper said suddenly, the idea forming even as she spoke. Maisie's eyes widened. "Where?" "The old market. The one everyone says is haunted." "Junie, no." Maisie shook her head violently. "Mama said never to go there. She said it's dangerous." "But no one goes there," Juniper insisted, her 5-year-old logic cutting through fear with desperation's sharp edge. "That means there might be food. Old cans. Boxes. Things people left behind." The twins stared at each other, weighing survival against obedience, hunger against fear. Finally, Maisie nodded. They would go together. They did everything together. They waited until their mother's crying softened into exhausted sleep, then slipped out into the rain like 2 small ghosts. The abandoned market stood 6 blocks away, a hulking shadow against the gray sky. Its windows were boarded up, its doors chained shut, and every kid in the neighborhood swore it was cursed. People said you could hear screaming inside at night. People said vagrants went in and never came out. But people also weren't starving. Juniper found a loose board at the back of the building, and the twins squeezed through, their small bodies easily navigating the gap that would have stopped an adult. Inside, the market was a cavern of shadows and decay. Shelves stood like tombstones, empty and covered in dust. The ceiling leaked in a dozen places, creating a symphony of drips that echoed in the vast space. "It smells bad," Maisie whispered, clutching Juniper's hand so tightly it hurt. "Let's look fast," Juniper replied, though her own heart was hammering against her ribs. They searched the aisles, finding nothing but rat droppings, broken glass, and the skeletons of what used to be a thriving business. Juniper felt tears burning behind her eyes. They'd risked everything, and for what? Empty shelves and disappointment? Then they heard it. A sound so faint they almost missed it beneath the rain's percussion on the roof. A groan. Low, pained, distinctly human. The twins froze, hands clasped together, bodies trembling. "Did you hear that?" Maisie breathed. Juniper nodded, unable to speak. The sound came again, and this time they could pinpoint its direction, toward the back of the market, where a door hung partially open, revealing stairs descending into darkness. Every instinct screamed at them to run. But something else, something neither twin could name but both felt deeply, pulled them forward. Someone was hurt. Someone needed help. They crept to the doorway, peering down into the basement. The stairs were wooden and rotted, dangerous even in daylight. In the dim filtering through cracks in the foundation, they could barely see anything. "Hello," Juniper called, her voice mouse small. The groaning stopped. Silence stretched like rubber, ready to snap. Then, "Help." The word was barely a rasp, destroyed by thirst or injury or both. "Please, help." The twins looked at each other. They were 5 years old. They were hungry and scared and so small that the world loomed huge and terrible around them. But someone down there was hurt, maybe dying, and no one else was coming. Juniper took the first step down. The stairs creaked ominously under her weight, and Maisie followed close behind, their hands still locked together. Slowly, carefully, they descended into the darkness, each step an act of courage bigger than their tiny bodies should have been able to hold. At the bottom, the basement opened into a storage area filled with rotting boxes and broken equipment. And there, in the far corner, illuminated by a single shaft of light from a cracked foundation window, was a man. He was tied to an old pipe, his wrists bound with thick rope, his body slumped against the concrete wall. His clothes, even dirty and torn as they were, looked expensive. His face was bruised and swollen, with dried blood crusted around his mouth and a gash above his eye. He looked like he'd been beaten, left to die in this forgotten place where no one would ever think to look. When his eyes opened and focused on the two small girls standing before him, something flickered in their depths: surprise, hope, disbelief. "Children." His voice cracked on the word. "You're just children." Maisie started crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. Juniper stepped forward, her little heart breaking at the sight of this broken man. "We'll help you," she said with all the fierce determination a 5-year-old could muster. "We promise. We'll help you." The man's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded weakly. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Neither the twins nor the man could have known in that moment how this meeting would change everything, how 2 hungry children and 1 dying billionaire would forge a bond that defied every rule about power, wealth, and who really held the strength to save lives. The rescue had begun. The first thing Ellis, that's what he'd told them his name was, needed was water. His lips were cracked and bleeding, his voice barely functional. Juniper and Maisie ran back through the rain to their apartment, sneaking past their still sleeping mother to fill 2 plastic bottles from the tap. They also grabbed a sleeve of crackers they'd been saving and one of the thin blankets from their shared bed. By the time they returned to the basement, carefully navigating the treacherous stairs with their precious cargo, Ellis had managed to shift into a slightly more upright position. The effort had clearly cost him. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the basement's chill. "Slowly," Juniper said, channeling her mother's voice when she was sick. "Drink slowly or you'll throw up." She held the bottle to his lips, tipping it carefully. Ellis drank like a man emerging from a desert, and they had to pull the bottle away when he started gulping too fast. Maisie wrapped the blanket around his shoulders as best she could given his restraints, her small hands gentle and careful. "Why are you tied up?" Maisie asked with the blunt curiosity of a 5-year-old. Ellis closed his eyes. "Bad men. They wanted something I wouldn't give them. So they left me here to die." "When?" Juniper pressed. "I don't know anymore. Days? A week?" Time stopped meaning anything. The twins looked at each other, communicating in that wordless way only twins can. They both understood. Ellis had been here, in this basement, suffering alone while the whole world went on above him. While they'd been hungry, he'd been dying. And no one, had come. "We'll come back," Juniper declared. "Every day. We'll bring food and water. We'll help you get better." "You can't tell anyone," Ellis said urgently, wincing as the movement sent pain through his battered body. "The men who did this, they might still be watching. If they know I'm alive, they'll come back. And if they find you helping me..." He couldn't finish the sentence, but the twins understood. "Danger. Real danger." "It's a secret," Maisie agreed solemnly. "We're good at secrets." And so began the strangest, most beautiful friendship any of them would ever know. Every morning, the twins would wake before dawn and slip out of the apartment while their mother still slept, exhausted from her night shifts at the diner. They'd go to the market, squeeze through the loose board, descend into that dark basement, and spend an hour with Ellis before racing back home. They brought him what they could: water bottles refilled from public fountains, crackers and bread ends they begged from the bakery, fruit that was bruised and marked down at the corner store. Once, Juniper even brought Ellis half of her own meager dinner, a cold hot dog wrapped in a napkin, because he'd looked so thin that day, so gray and faded. But more than food and water, the twins brought something Ellis hadn't realized he'd lost until he felt it again in their presence: humanity. Connection. They would sit with him in that dim basement, and they would talk. Ellis would tell them stories about places he'd traveled: Paris, Tokyo, the Australian outback, painting pictures with words for two little girls who'd never been more than 10 blocks from their apartment building. He described the Eiffel Tower at sunrise, the taste of fresh sushi in a Tokyo market, the impossible red of the desert at sunset. In return, Juniper and Maisie told him about their world: their mother who worked so hard she was always tired, the neighbor who had a cat named Pickles, the way the rain made their ceiling leak in the corner and they had to put a bucket there at night. Their stories were small, but Ellis listened like each one was precious. "Your mother sounds like an incredible woman," Ellis said one morning after Juniper had described how Mama had given away her lunch to a homeless man even though they barely had enough food themselves. "She is," both twins said together, then giggled at the synchronization. "She taught you well," Ellis continued, his voice stronger now after days of care. "To have compassion. To help someone even when you're scared. Even when you have so little yourselves." "Mama says kindness doesn't cost money," Maisie explained matter-of-factly. "She says it just costs heart." Ellis looked at these two small girls, their clothes threadbare, their bodies too thin, their faces marked by poverty's casual cruelty, and felt something crack open in his chest. Here he was, a man who'd built an empire, who had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, who dined with presidents and closed deals worth billions. And he'd been saved by 2 5-year-old children who had nothing but chose to share it anyway. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the profound lesson. By the end of the first week, Ellis could sit up without wincing. His wounds were healing, though infection had been a constant threat in the filthy basement. The twins had stolen antibiotic ointment from a pharmacy, their first and only theft, committed out of desperate love, and carefully applied it to his cuts each morning. By the 10th day, Ellis could stand with help, leaning heavily on the pipe he was tied to. "Why don't we untie you?" Juniper asked, studying the knots that bound his wrists. "These are professional knots," Ellis explained. "You'd need a knife or scissors." And he paused, his expression darkening. "If I'm free and the wrong people see me, you could be in danger. Better to wait until I'm strong enough to actually leave and get somewhere safe." The twins accepted this, though Maisie worried constantly about the ropes cutting into his wrists. She'd wrap them with strips torn from the blanket, creating makeshift padding. On the 11th day, Ellis began to ask about their lives in earnest. Where did they live? How was their mother managing? The twins, trusting him completely now, told him everything: the eviction notice, the empty cupboards, the way Mama cried when she thought they couldn't hear. Ellis's jaw tightened as he listened, but he said nothing. What could he say? That he could solve all their problems with a single phone call, if only he weren't tied up in a basement, presumed dead, cut off from everything and everyone? On the 12th day, Juniper arrived with a revelation that made Maisie gasp. "I heard Mama on the phone. She found a new job. A better one. We might not have to move." Ellis smiled, the first real smile the twins had seen from him. "That's wonderful news." "It is." Maisie bounced on her toes. "And guess what else? Tomorrow is our birthday. We're going to be 6. Something shifted in Ellis's expression, joy and sorrow mixing into something complex and adult and beyond the twins' understanding. 6 years old, he murmured. "You're about to turn 6, and you've been saving a grown man's life. Do you know how extraordinary you are?" The twins shrugged, embarrassed and pleased in equal measure. "I mean it," Ellis insisted. and his voice carried a weight that made them pause and really listen. In my whole life, I've met kings and queens, brilliant scientists, powerful leaders. But I've never met anyone braver or kinder than you two. You've changed me. You've reminded me what really matters. And I will never, ever forget you. Tears welled in his eyes, and seeing a grown man cry made the twins rush forward to hug him as best they could with his restraints. They stayed like that for a long moment, three people who shouldn't have been connected by any logic of the world, bound together by something deeper than circumstance. Tomorrow, Alice said when they finally pulled back, I want you to do something for me. I want you to stay home. Celebrate your birthday with your mother. Don't come here. But, Juniper started. Please, Alice interrupted gently. One day, let me give you that gift. Spend your birthday being 6-year-old girls, not secret rescuers. I'll be fine for one day. I promise. Reluctantly, the twins agreed. They stayed for another hour, talking and laughing, telling Alice about what they hoped their mother might give them for their birthday, though they knew money was tight and expectations had to be low. Finally, they said goodbye with hugs and promises to return the day after tomorrow. As they climbed the stairs and squeezed back through the loose board into the rainy morning, neither twin noticed Alice's expression as he watched them go, equal parts love and sorrow, gratitude and goodbye. The 13th day was their birthday, and true to their word, the twins stayed home. Their mother had managed to scrape together enough for a small cake from the discount bakery and 2 wrapped packages, second-hand coloring books and a box of crayons to share. It was the best birthday they could remember. On the 14th day, Juniper and Maisie woke before dawn, excited to tell Alice everything. They'd saved him a piece of cake, carefully wrapped in a napkin. They dressed quickly and quietly, slipping out into the early morning stillness. The market looked the same as always, abandoned, eerie, forgotten. They squeezed through the loose board, navigated the empty aisles, and descended the basement stairs with practiced ease. But the basement wasn't the same. The corner where Alice had been tied up was empty. The ropes lay on the ground, cut clean through. The blanket was folded neatly against the wall. And their Alice, was gone. For a long moment, the twins just stood there, frozen in the dim basement light, unable to process what they were seeing. The space where Alice had been, where he'd spent nearly 2 weeks suffering and healing and becoming their friend, was simply empty, as if he'd never existed at all. Maisie started crying first, big silent tears that rolled down her cheeks and dripped from her chin. Juniper walked forward slowly, like she was in a dream, until she reached the spot where he'd been tied. She picked up the cut ropes, examining them with her small fingers. Clean cuts. Professional. Someone had come with a blade and freed him. Or taken him. Alice. Juniper called out, her voice echoing in the basement's emptiness. Alice, are you here? Only silence answered. Maybe he's hiding, Maisie said desperately, wiping at her tears. Maybe those bad men came and he's hiding somewhere safe. They searched the entire basement, calling his name, checking behind every stack of boxes and broken shelf. They searched until dust coated their clothes and cobwebs caught in their hair. They searched until their voices were hoarse and their hearts were cracking like old plaster. But Alice was gone. Finally, exhausted and heartbroken, the twins sank down beside the folded blanket. Juniper picked it up, hugging it to her chest. It still smelled like Alice, a mixture of the soap they'd brought him from home and something else, something that was uniquely him. Why would he leave without saying goodbye? Maisie whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. We saved him, Junie. We brought him food every day. We took care of him. We loved him. Juniper had no answer. She was 5, no, 6 now, freshly 6, and the world had just taught her a cruel lesson about how people can disappear, how love doesn't always mean staying, how sometimes you can give everything and still be left with empty hands and an empty space where someone important used to be. Maybe he had to go fast, Juniper tried, though she didn't believe it herself. Maybe it wasn't safe to wait for us. Then why did he fold the blanket? Maisie challenged, pointing at the neat square Juniper held. Why did he make it all nice if he was in a hurry? He could have just dropped it and run. She was right. The folded blanket was a message, though the twins couldn't quite decipher it. Gratitude. Goodbye. All those things wrapped in a simple gesture that had taken time and effort when he surely had neither to spare. They sat there for another hour, waiting and hoping that maybe he would come back, that this was all a mistake or a test or something they couldn't understand yet. But the basement remained empty except for the sound of water dripping and the twins' quiet sniffles. Finally, as the morning sun strengthened and they knew their mother would soon wake, Juniper stood up with the blanket clutched in her arms. "We have to go," she said softly. "Mama will worry." "We can come back tomorrow," Maisie said, hope and desperation mixing in her voice. "Maybe he'll leave us a note. Maybe he'll explain." "Maybe," Juniper agreed, though something heavy in her chest told her Alice wouldn't be back, that this goodbye was permanent even if it had never been spoken. They climbed the stairs one last time, each step feeling heavier than before. The market seemed different now, not haunted by ghosts but by memory, by the echo of a friendship that had existed in secret and ended the same way. Over the next week, the twins returned to the basement every day. Each time, they hoped to find something, a note, a sign, any evidence that Ellis had been real and that he'd cared about them the way they'd cared about him. But the basement remained empty, and eventually even the folded blanket they'd left there as a kind of offering disappeared, taken by some vagrant or rotted by the dampness. Their mother noticed the change in them. The twins were quieter now, more withdrawn. When she asked what was wrong, they shook their heads and said nothing, because how could they explain? How could they tell her about sneaking out every morning, about finding a dying man in a basement, about becoming his lifeline and then watching him vanish? The secret that had bonded them to Ellis now isolated them even from their own mother. "Did someone hurt you?" Mama asked one night, her voice tight with a parent's worst fears. "Did something bad happen?" "No," both twins said quickly, honestly. "Nothing bad, Mama. We promise." And it was true in a way. Nothing bad had happened. Something good had happened. Something beautiful and important and transformative. And then it had ended, the way good things sometimes do, without explanation or closure or fairness. But the absence of bad didn't mean the presence of okay. 3 weeks after Ellis's disappearance, something strange happened. Their landlord came to the apartment, his usual scowl replaced by confusion. "The rent's been paid," he announced gruffly. "All of it. 6 months in advance. And the back rent too." Mama went pale. "What? That's impossible. I didn't." "Anonymous payment. Came through this morning. Cashier's check, all official and legal." He shrugged. "I don't ask questions when money shows up. You're good until next spring." After he left, Mama sank into a chair, shaking. "I don't understand. How could?" But Juniper and Maisie understood. They looked at each other across the small living room, and in that twin language that needed no words, they knew. Ellis. Somehow, impossibly, Ellis had kept his promise. He'd said he would never forget them, and he'd meant it. 2 days later, a package arrived. No return address, just their names written in elegant handwriting on the brown paper wrapping. Inside were 2 things, a brand new coloring book for each twin, professional quality with thick pages and beautiful illustrations, and a letter. Mama read it to them because they were still learning their letters. "Dear Juniper and Maisie, thank you for the most precious gift anyone has ever given me, hope. You saved my life, but more than that, you reminded me what life is worth saving for. You taught me that wealth has nothing to do with money and that the smallest hands can hold the greatest power. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. The people who hurt me were still looking for me, and staying would have put you in danger. I couldn't let that happen. You'd already risked so much for me. I want you to know that your kindness changed me forever. I was lost before I met you, lost in a world of numbers and deals and power that meant nothing. You showed me what really matters: compassion, courage, and the choice to help someone even when you're scared, even when you have nothing to give but heart. Your mother is a hero for raising such extraordinary daughters. Take care of her, keep making her proud, and never forget that what you did, what you are, is proof that the world can be good, that people can be kind, that miracles happen every day in the form of 2 small girls who chose love over fear. I will carry you in my heart forever. With infinite gratitude, Ellis." By the time Mama finished reading, all 3 of them were crying. The twins finally told her everything, the whole story tumbling out in overlapping sentences and tearful explanations. They expected her to be angry about the sneaking out, the danger, the secrets. Instead, she held them so tight they could barely breathe and whispered, "I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud." That night, as the twins lay in bed with the letter tucked between them like treasure, Maisie asked the question that had been haunting them both. "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" Juniper was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I don't know. But I think maybe that's okay. We were supposed to help him, and we did. And he helped us too, even if it wasn't the way we expected." "How did he help us?" Maisie asked. "We were the ones who saved him. He showed us we were strong," Juniper said slowly, working through thoughts too big for a 6-year-old but somehow finding the words anyway. "We didn't know we were brave until we had to be. We didn't know we could save someone until we did. Ellis gave us that. He showed us who we really are." Maisie considered this, then nodded. Yeah, I think you're right." They fell asleep holding hands, the way they always did, with Ellis's letter pressed between their hearts and his memory folded into their souls like the blanket he'd left behind. A gift of warmth that would last much longer than fabric ever could. The years that followed moved quickly, the way childhood years do, each one bringing changes that seemed massive in the moment but blurred together in memory. Juniper and Maisie grew taller, stronger, their faces losing the round softness of early childhood and beginning to show hints of the women they would become. Their mother's new job at the hospital, something that had mysteriously opened up a month after Ellis's disappearance, complete with references she didn't remember giving, provided steady income and benefits. They moved from their cramped apartment to a small house with an actual backyard. Nothing fancy, but theirs. The twins never forgot Ellis, though over time the sharp edge of his absence dulled into something more manageable, like a scar instead of an open wound. They kept his letter in a special box, reading it whenever they felt lost or scared or uncertain. His words had become a compass, pointing them toward the kind of people they wanted to be. At school, while other kids fought over toys or formed exclusive cliques, Juniper and Maisie developed a reputation for being the ones who helped. They befriended the lonely kids, stood up to bullies, shared their lunch with anyone who seemed hungry. Teachers praised their compassion. Counselors noted their unusual maturity and empathy for their age. No one knew the source of these qualities was a secret kept in their hearts. A dying man in a basement, 13 days of tender care, and the lesson that power and wealth meant nothing compared to kindness and courage. When they were 8, a new student joined their class, a boy named Marcus who'd just come out of foster care. He was angry and scared and lashed out at everyone who tried to get close. The other students avoided him. Even some teachers seemed relieved when he was absent. But Juniper and Maisie saw something else. They saw someone who was hurt, who was tied up by circumstances beyond his control, who needed someone to bring him water and warmth and the simple message that he wasn't alone. They befriended Marcus with the same persistent gentleness they'd shown Ellis. They sat with him at lunch when he ate alone. They included him in their games when others excluded him. They listened when he was angry and didn't flinch when he yelled because they understood that sometimes pain comes out as rage when there's nowhere else for it to go. Slowly, impossibly, Marcus softened. He smiled. He laughed. He began to trust that not everyone would hurt him. By the end of the school year, he'd become one of their best friends, and the other students followed the twins' example, accepting Marcus into the fabric of classroom life. "How did you know he wasn't just a mean kid?" their mother asked one evening when Marcus was over for dinner, his laughter filling their small house with unexpected joy. The twins looked at each other, sharing that wordless conversation that still happened daily even as they grew. "Everybody has a reason for how they act," Juniper said carefully. "Sometimes people just need someone to see past the scary parts to the hurt parts underneath." Mama smiled and shook her head in wonder. "When did you two get so wise?" "We had a good teacher," Maisie said simply, and Juniper knew without asking that her sister was thinking about Ellis, about the lessons learned in a dark basement during 13 days that had shaped the rest of their lives. When the twins turned 10, the old market was finally torn down. They stood across the street with their mother, watching the demolition equipment reduce the building to rubble and dust. Juniper felt Maisie grab her hand and squeeze tight. "Goodbye," Maisie whispered, so quietly only Juniper could hear. "Goodbye," Juniper echoed, though she wasn't sure if they were saying goodbye to the building or to the last physical place that connected them to Ellis. That night, they took out the letter and read it again by flashlight under their covers, the way they'd done dozens of times over the years. The paper was creased and worn, the ink slightly faded, but the words still carried the same weight, the same truth. "Do you think he thinks about us?" Maisie asked. "Yes," Juniper answered without hesitation. "He said he'd carry us in his heart forever." Ellis didn't lie. If he said it, he meant it. "I wonder what he's doing right now." "Something good, probably," Juniper said. "Maybe helping people. Maybe using what we taught him the same way we use what he taught us." Maisie smiled in the darkness. "I like that idea. That we're all still connected, even if we never see each other again. Like invisible threads tying us together." They fell asleep that way, holding hands as always, the letter tucked safely back in its box, and both twins dreaming of a man they'd saved and who'd saved them right back. The truth was, Juniper and Maisie would never know the full extent of Ellis's impact on the world after his rescue. They didn't know that Ellis Richardson was the CEO of one of the country's largest philanthropic foundations. They didn't know that his kidnapping had been orchestrated by competitors who wanted to force him to sign over control of his company's assets. They didn't know that after his escape, Ellis had completely restructured his foundation's mission, shifting billions of dollars toward programs that helped impoverished families. Programs focused on housing security, childhood nutrition, access to education, and healthcare for the working poor. They didn't know that every scholarship that bore his foundation's name, every free clinic that opened in underserved neighborhoods, every food bank that suddenly received massive anonymous donations, all of it traced back to two 5-year-old girls who'd brought water to a dying man and taught a billionaire what real wealth looked like. They didn't know because Ellis had kept his promise to protect them. He'd never revealed their identities, never exposed them to the media circus that had surrounded his dramatic return from the dead. He'd helped them anonymously, the rent, the job for their mother, the small trust funds established in their names that they wouldn't learn about until they turned 18. What Juniper and Maisie did know, what they carried forward every single day, was the fundamental truth Ellis had reflected back to them in that basement. That compassion is a superpower, that kindness can move mountains, and that the smallest people can make the biggest difference. On the twins' 16th birthday, a package arrived. No return address, just like the coloring books from years ago, but this time the handwriting was shakier, older. Inside were 2 identical bracelets, simple silver bands with an inscription, "Heroes come in all sizes." And a note, brief but weighted with everything unsaid, "Thank you for teaching me how to live." Juniper and Maisie wore those bracelets every day from then on, and when people asked about them, they would smile and say, "They were a gift from someone we helped once, a long time ago." They never told the full story. Some miracles are meant to be kept sacred, protected by silence and the privacy of hearts that understand their value. Ellis had been their secret, and even though he was gone from their lives, he remained woven into their souls. A constant reminder that the world is shaped not by the loud and powerful but by the quiet and compassionate. As they grew into young women, Juniper studying social work, Maisie training to be a nurse, they each chose paths that would let them continue the work they'd started in that basement at 5 years old. The work of seeing people who were invisible, helping those who were hurting, and proving every single day that true strength has nothing to do with money or power. It has everything to do with heart. And 2 small girls who'd been poor in everything except the things that actually mattered had taught that lesson to a billionaire, who then taught it back to them, creating a circle of compassion that would ripple outward for generations, invisible threads connecting strangers, transforming lives, proving that salvation can flow in both directions and that sometimes the people who need rescuing are the ones who look like they have everything. Late at night, when the world was quiet and the twins lay in their separate college dorms miles apart, they would sometimes touch the bracelets on their wrists and send a thought out into the universe, hoping somehow it would reach the man who'd disappeared from a basement but never from their hearts. "Thank you for letting us save you. Thank you for saving us right back. Thank you for showing us who we really are." And somewhere, in an office high above a city they'd never visited, An older man with silver at his temples would touch an identical bracelet on his own wrist and send the same message back. Thank you, little ones. For everything. Forever. The invisible threads held strong. What would you have done at 5 years old? Would you have had the courage to help a stranger? Would you have risked everything for someone you didn't even know? This story reminds us that true heroism isn't about being the strongest or the richest or the most powerful. It's about choosing compassion when the world gives you every reason to choose fear. It's about 2 little girls who had nothing but gave everything, and in doing so, changed not just one man's life but the trajectory of thousands of lives through the work he went on to do. If this story made your heart ache with the beauty of what children can teach us, if it reminded you that kindness is the ultimate superpower, if it restored your faith that good people still exist in this world, then we need you to do something right now. Smash that like button if you believe compassion matters more than wealth. Comment, heart over money, if this story touched you. I read every single comment, and I want to hear about the moments you chose kindness even when it was hard. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because every week I bring you real stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, stories that prove humanity is worth believing in. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their small acts of kindness matter. Share it with the person who's struggling and needs to know they're not alone. Share it with anyone who's forgotten that the world can still be beautiful, that people can still be good, that miracles happen in the form of 2 small girls and 1 chance to make a difference. We're building a community here, a family of people who refuse to accept that cruelty has to win, who believe in standing up for what's right, who understand that changing the world starts with changing one person's day. Don't just watch these stories, be these stories. Let Juniper and Maisie inspire you to look around your own life and ask, who needs my help? Who's invisible that I could see? What small act of courage could I commit today? Hit like right now. Drop a comment. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, you don't need money or power to change the world. You just need heart. And if 2 5-year-old girls can save a billionaire and transform their entire community through ripples of kindness, imagine what you can do. Welcome to the community of invisible heroes. Let's change the world together. 1 story, 1 heart, 1 act of courage at a time.